So today, I would like for you to imagine that you are an entrepreneur and that in your hand you're holding the next big idea. And with this idea, when it's introduced into the marketplace, you know that it's going to change lives. It's going to create lots of value for the people that are using it, and it might even be considered a disruptive innovation. So if you were holding this idea, I ask you, well, where would you want to be? Now, if I were to answer this question, I would say, well, if I was an entrepreneur holding an idea, I would want to be in an urban area, perhaps an area like Hickory, a place where resources are right at my fingertips, and I can really take this idea and then move it into action. But what happens if you're an entrepreneur with an idea, and you might be just a little bit north in Alexander County, North Carolina, in a rural area, and you're an entrepreneur with an idea? So today I'm going to share with you my experiences, some of my theories and my thoughts as a researcher relating to rural entrepreneurship. So if you were an entrepreneur in Alexander County, North Carolina, and you had this idea, where would be the first place that you would go? Well, it seems simple. You might even go to Main Street and go to the local Chamber of Commerce. It seems like a logical place to go, and it's in the heart of downtown Taylorsville. But when you arrive at the Chamber of Commerce, this is what you're going to find. You're going to find a door that says closed. So if you show up there with your idea, there's no one there to assist you in any way. Okay, well, maybe we can't go to the Chamber, but there are other places that we could go to in Alexander County for assistance. So the first place would be the local Alexander County Economic Development Corporation. It's most certainly open, but when the entrepreneur arrives there, they're going to find that the EDC is only staffed by 2 people. They're very nice guys, but unfortunately they don't have a lot of resources to help rural entrepreneurs. Okay, so maybe we might move on to another place. Next would be the Catawba Valley Community College Alexander Center. So if you show up there with your ideas, you're going to find that the Small Business Center is located on the main campus in Hickory, which is a 30 to 45-minute drive for some residents located in Alexander County. So in order to get help for your idea, you might have to travel into the urban area if you are a rural entrepreneur. So in order for someone to be entrepreneurial, they first have to be creative. Creativity is the foundation for entrepreneurial expression. The entrepreneur has to be creative first before they can get a niche into the marketplace. So since entrepreneurship exists in rural areas, we also know that creativity exists in rural areas as well. Creativity. It's something that we think of as being very far removed from who we are. But in fact, creativity kind of is the basis for the everyday life that we lead. So this morning when you were putting on your clothes, you were looking in your wardrobe, and you were saying, oh, I might wear this shirt with these pants. Well, you were engaged in making creative decisions. For lunch today, we were in the lunch line, we were looking at what was available. We might have taken a couple items, but not all of them. We were engaged in making creative decisions, even though we might have not been thinking of them as creative choices. So you don't have to be an artist to necessarily be creative. Creativity is the basis of the human experience that we all share. Now, I think entrepreneurs are very creative people, but I think that they engage with creativity in a different way. And they engage in what I call entrepreneurial creativity. And that's creativity that's value-driven. Entrepreneurs use creativity for a very specific purpose, to be creating value in whatever context that they're working in. So entrepreneurial creativity is value-driven creativity. So we've been throwing this word around, creativity. And what really is creativity? It's a great question. In 1961, a guy by the name of Mel Rhodes published a 4-part definition of creativity that revolutionized the way we think and conceptualize creative actions. So first and foremost, creativity is a creative product. It's the thing that results from creativity. So if you are an artist, your creative product might be a painting. If you are an entrepreneur, it might be a new business model or a new product. Or in the case of picking out our lunch today, it would have been the meal that you ended up with on your plate. So the creative product is the thing or the something that results from creativity. Now, this creative product just doesn't appear. The creative product is the result of the creative process. So the creative process is we start by maybe identifying a question, something that needs to be innovative upon. So we identify the question, we might refine the question a little bit. We have this period of kind of sitting on the idea, a period of incubation, where we're engaging with creativity in order to move to the creative product. Then we might have that aha moment, that moment where we have our moment of insight, where we know exactly how we're going to create our creative product. Now, this creative process and the creation of this creative product, it just doesn't happen. There has to be a person there in order for the process to create the product. So we're all very different creative people. We all have our own unique set of experiences, perspectives, and truths that help us to interact with the process to create the creative product. Now, if I were to be creative and you were to be creative, we could expect very different results. And why is that? Well, we're very different creative people. So we might engage with the process differently and therefore create different creative products. Now, the creative person, the creative process, and the creative products are all in some sort of context. And that context, or the creative environment, is referred to as the creative press. So this is saying that wherever a creative action takes place, some part of the environment has a bearing on how that product is expressed. So if you're an entrepreneur working in a rural area or an entrepreneur working in an urban area, there's a bearing on the creative product based on the space that is around the action. So we see that place matters in creativity. And since place matters in entrepreneurship, it definitely matters in creativity, since creativity is foundational to some sort of entrepreneurial expression. So how do we evaluate place within creativity? You can't simply show up somewhere and start looking for creativity. I mean, what does creativity even look like? It takes a culture, it takes people to deem a product as being creative or not. But there are three parameters that we can look at to say, you know, in this place or in this creative environment, if these three factors are there, we might have a better chance of being creative. And so the first is information. So for an entrepreneur, do they have access to the information that they need in order to start a business, to collect taxes? So does the entrepreneur have the information that they need to engage in creativity? The second part is called access to the field of expertise. Entrepreneurs operate in very specific industries. So how do entrepreneurs connect with different people? How do they find out what's going on around them in their industry so they too can be creative? And then the third is novel stimulation. Earlier I mentioned the aha moment that's often associated with creativity. So how do entrepreneurs get that aha moment? How do they get their next idea? So looking at these three things, we can kind of evaluate creativity within a context or within a place. So going back to Alexander County, North Carolina for a second, we see that in the top left corner of this map here, we have the Alexander County Chamber of Commerce. So let's focus on that. So this map has different nodes, and each node represents an organization. And so coming off of these are people connected with that organization. Now these organizations represent who I consider the stakeholders within the entrepreneurial environment in Alexander County. So as I mentioned, the chamber has closed, but the chamber might not be there, but the people are still there. So how are these people interacting with the entrepreneurial environment? The organization may go away, but the people are not going away. The stakeholders hold some sort of power. From this map, we also see lines interconnecting the different dots. These are people that are repeated across organizations. So it boils down to, at the very end, that we have all these people interacting in the entrepreneurial environment, being stakeholders in this situation, but there's only a small handful of them that are really making the decisions for rural entrepreneurs. So earlier we saw that the Alexander County Chamber of Commerce had closed, and if we were dealing with this idea right here, we kind of marked the chamber off the list. But the chamber is still serving a very vital role in the entrepreneurial environment, even though it's closed. It's serving a role, a persisting role, for economic development. It's serving as a symbol of growth and development, even though it's closed. Now, how do I get this conclusion? So if we look at this picture closely, we see that there's lots of stories happening here. Well, first it says closed on the door, but like, what does closed even mean? It doesn't say closed for lunch, be back in 20 minutes. It doesn't say closed permanently. What does closed even mean? Also, there are different packages that are left outside the door. It looks like some papers and a bag. So if the chamber is closed, why are people still leaving packages there? It means that these people are arriving at the door of the chamber wanting to interact with the people on the inside. So even though the door says closed, people are still interacting with this organization even though it's not actively open. One thing about rural areas is people think, well, rural areas are stagnant. Nothing is happening there. Rural areas are dying. And as a researcher, I see a very different picture. I see rural areas as being dynamic places. People are communicating with each other, people are moving, places are changing, and spaces are shifting. So a few weeks ago, I was back in Taylorsville, and I was on the main street, and I saw this building, and it really spoke to me, to this kind of concept of movement happening. So we see a building here, and from this was an old shop, and it says, going out of business. Some may see this as a sign of stagnation, but there's still movement happening in this place and in this building if we look a little bit closer at this picture. So in the far corner, we see that there's a sign in the window. So what is this sign? So the sign is encouraging residents to vote for all four in an alcohol referendum to allow alcohol sales in Alexander County as a way to bring about some economic activity. So this building is closed, the business inside of it is closed, but either the owner of the building or the prior business owner is still interacting with space, even though this is a vacant location. There's movement happening, even though it appears that nothing is happening. So the ABC alcohol referendum was brought about by a group called the Citizens for the Future of the Alexander County. And it's a home-based network of community members that are concerned about primarily the economic condition of Alexander County. As one member put it, the CFAC has become a de facto chamber. So in the wake of the chamber's closure, community members are coming together to create a citizen-based organization to bring about economic change. So maybe the chamber closed, but maybe a good model for what a new rural chamber should look like would be what the Citizens for the Future of Alexander County are doing, meeting in their homes, interacting with people, and working towards some type of social issue, such as the ABC alcohol referendum. The Alexander County Economic Development Corporation was also impacted by the closure of the chamber. When the chamber closed, they hired a second person to work at the EDC, a small business development coordinator, directly working with small business in the community. The EDC also launched a buy local campaign to encourage residents to keep their money at home and keep their tax dollars within the county limits. Now, the buy local campaign is very interesting because it uses Facebook and YouTube in a unique way to engage with communities. The chamber before wasn't engaging with the community in this way, but the EDC is using social media as a way to connect with the community. So the EDC is reaching into this virtual space that the chamber never touched. So it's perhaps a unique model as well to look at for what might a rural chamber look like in the future for Alexander County. So maybe the answer is a virtual chamber, that a physical presence might not be needed at all in a rural area. So the actions of the Citizens for the Future of Alexander County are very creative in their attempts to solve problems within the rural space. And the local Economic Development Corporation is also very creative in their dealings with the closure of the chamber to still bring about some sense of movement in the rural space. So for an entrepreneur, it all starts with this one simple idea. And great ideas really know no boundaries. So if an entrepreneur is operating in a rural area or an urban area, we each want them to have the best opportunity to explore their ideas. Creativity is foundational to this. And creativity is foundational to the lives that we all lead. And I believe that creativity is foundational and central to building a strong and resilient rural America. Thank you.